What's the craziest thing you've ever dreamed of doing? Quitting your job to start a business? Moving to a country you've never even heard of? Now imagine being just 22 years old and telling everyone around you that you're going to build the fastest car on Earth. Not in Germany, not in Italy, but in a tiny village in Sweden, inside an old chicken barn. Most people would have laughed. Some would have called it impossible, and honestly, they would have had every reason to. Sweden wasn't known for building exotic supercars. It was known for safe, practical family cars like Volvo and Saab. Yet one young man believed he could challenge Ferrari, Lamborghini, McLaren, and eventually even Bugatti. That man was Christian von Koenigsegg. Today, his company builds some of the fastest and most technologically advanced cars ever created. Machines capable of exceeding 500 kilometers per hour. But none of this started with billions of dollars, famous engineers, or massive factories. It started with a childhood dream that refused to die. Believe it or not, the entire story began with a cartoon. When Christian was just 5 years old, his father took him to the cinema to watch a Norwegian stop-motion animated film called The Pinchcliffe Grand Prix. The movie followed a bicycle mechanic who built his own race car from scratch and entered a competition against the best drivers in the world. For most children, it was simply an entertaining afternoon at the movies. They watched it, enjoyed it, and forgot about it the next day. But Christian wasn't like most children. As he walked out of the theater, only one thought filled his mind. One day, I'm going to build my own car. It wasn't a passing fantasy. It became an obsession. As he grew older, that obsession only became stronger. While other teenagers were playing sports or hanging out with friends, Christian spent his time taking machines apart just to understand how they worked. Vacuum cleaners, lawnmowers, motorcycles. If it had moving parts, he wanted to rebuild it. His friends would bring him their motorcycles, and instead of simply repairing them, he'd modify them to make them faster and more powerful. He wasn't following instructions. He was inventing his own solutions. People in his hometown started seeing him as the brilliant kid who always had impossible ideas. But deep down, he never forgot the promise he had made to himself as a 5-year-old boy. Dreams, however, cost money. And Christian understood that before he could build a supercar company, he first had to become an entrepreneur. At just 19 years old, he launched a small trading business. He sold anything people were willing to buy, from plastic bags to frozen food and everyday products. It wasn't glamorous, but it generated something far more valuable than prestige. It generated capital. Every profit brought him one step closer to financing the dream that everyone else considered impossible. Even during those early business years, his mind never stopped inventing. Long before MP3 players became popular, Christian came up with the idea of storing music on electronic memory chips instead of CDs. Today, that sounds completely normal, but at the time it was revolutionary. He tried to develop the concept and present it as a real product. Nobody believed in it. Investors rejected the idea, manufacturers weren't interested, and the project eventually failed. For many people, that would have been enough to discourage them. For Christian, it became proof that thinking differently often means thinking ahead of your time. By 1994, his small business had become successful enough to provide him with a comfortable future. He was only 22 years old and already earning a solid income. Most people would have continued growing the company, bought a nice house, maybe a sports car, and enjoyed financial security. Christian made the exact opposite decision. One morning, he looked at everything he had built and realized something. If he didn't chase his dream now, he probably never would. So he sold everything. He gathered every cent he owned and made a decision that would completely change automotive history. Then came one of the most important conversations of his life. He walked up to his father and said, "I'm going to build the fastest car in the world." Imagine hearing that from your 22-year-old son. No engineering degree, no experience building cars, no factory, no investors, just an impossible dream. Most parents would have told him to be realistic. They would have told him to keep the successful business he already had. Instead, Christian's father did something extraordinary. He believed in his son. He invested his own savings into the project and even sold family assets to help finance the dream. It wasn't just financial support. It was complete trust in an idea that almost everyone else believed would fail. With that money, Christian rented a tiny workshop in the Swedish town of Olofström. It wasn't a modern research center. It wasn't a high-tech automotive laboratory. It was little more than a converted garage. This humble building would become the birthplace of one of the world's greatest hypercar manufacturers. Next came the team. Surprisingly, they weren't famous automotive engineers. One specialized in automotive paint. Another worked with carbon fiber. None of them had built a world-class supercar before. What united them wasn't experience. It was belief. They believed that impossible problems could be solved if they were willing to work hard enough. Inside that tiny garage, Christian began sketching what would become the first Koenigsegg prototype. Every major design decision came directly from him. The body shape, the proportions, the aerodynamic philosophy, even the now iconic doors that rotate outward and upward were designed by Christian himself. He wasn't just the founder of the company. He was the designer, the engineer, the project manager, and sometimes even the mechanic. When there wasn't enough money to hire experts, he simply became the expert himself. But one enormous problem remained. A supercar is nothing without its engine. Christian initially tried to purchase powerful V8 engines from established manufacturers. Audi refused. Other suppliers weren't interested in helping a tiny unknown startup from Sweden. Formula One engine companies also declined. One by one, every door closed in front of him. Without an engine, the entire project was on the verge of collapsing before the first prototype had even been completed. Most entrepreneurs would have accepted defeat. Christian made a different decision. If nobody was willing to build the engine he needed, he would build it himself. Building a hypercar engine from scratch is something even the largest manufacturers hesitate to do. Companies with thousands of engineers and billion-dollar research budgets spend years developing a single engine. Christian von Koenigsegg was trying to do it with a tiny team working inside a small workshop in Sweden. To almost everyone else, it looked like complete insanity. But Christian had already accepted one simple truth. If nobody was willing to help him, then he would have to create everything himself. For nearly 2 years, the team worked day and night. Every setback became another lesson. Every failure forced them to think differently. Slowly, piece by piece, the first Koenigsegg prototype began to take shape. Then, in 1996, the impossible finally happened. For the very first time, a Koenigsegg rolled out of the workshop under its own power. It wasn't polished, it wasn't painted to perfection, it wasn't ready for production. But it moved. The dream that had started in a movie theater 20 years earlier had become reality. Christian took the prototype to a Swedish motor show, hoping people would simply notice it. Instead, the reaction exceeded every expectation. Crowds gathered around the mysterious supercar from Sweden. Journalists couldn't believe what they were seeing. A brand new manufacturer had appeared out of nowhere with a design that looked like it belonged 20 years in the future. Investors became curious. Potential customers started asking questions. For the first time, Koenigsegg wasn't just a dream. It was becoming a real company. Years of development followed as the team refined every detail. Their goal wasn't simply to build another exotic sports car. They wanted to create something capable of competing with Ferrari, Lamborghini, and McLaren on equal terms. Every improvement pushed the company closer to that goal. By 2003, they were finally preparing to deliver cars to customers. After years of sacrifice, sleepless nights, and relentless work, success finally seemed within reach. Then disaster struck. A massive fire tore through the factory within hours. Years of work disappeared in flames. Equipment, tools, prototypes, engineering data. Everything the team had built was destroyed. The small workshop that had given birth to Koenigsegg was reduced to ashes. For a young company with limited resources, it could have been the end. Most startups would have declared bankruptcy. Investors would have walked away. Employees would have found new jobs. But Christian refused to let the story end there. Only days after the fire, he gathered his team among the burned remains of the factory. Instead of talking about what they had lost, he talked about what they would build next. He believed every crisis also created an opportunity. If they had to rebuild anyway, why not rebuild something even better? That mindset changed everything. While searching for a new home, Christian discovered an abandoned Swedish Air Force base. It was unlike anything they had imagined. Massive aircraft hangars, long runways, wide open space. It was the perfect place for a company obsessed with speed. Koenigsegg moved into one of the old military hangars, and remarkably, that former airbase remains the company's headquarters to this day. The location carried its own fascinating history. For decades, the airbase had been home to one of Sweden's elite fighter squadrons. Local legends claimed that people could hear aircraft flying overhead late at night without ever seeing them, giving rise to stories about ghost pilots haunting the skies. The squadron itself embraced that legend, adopting the ghost as its official emblem alongside the motto, "The show must go on." Christian loved both the story and what it represented. No matter what happened, the mission continued. Today, every Koenigsegg carries the famous Ghost Squadron emblem, quietly honoring the airbase that gave the company a second chance. It's more than a badge. It's a reminder that even after losing everything, the company refused to give up. The move transformed Koenigsegg in every possible way. With larger facilities came bigger ambitions. Development accelerated. Engineers could finally test their ideas with far fewer limitations. Christian continued questioning every convention in automotive engineering, refusing to accept that things had to be done the way they always had been. Then came the breakthrough that changed everything. In 2005, Koenigsegg introduced the CCR. The mission was simple: prove that this tiny Swedish company belonged among the greatest performance car manufacturers in the world. They took the CCR to Italy's legendary Nardo Ring, one of the fastest automotive testing facilities ever built. There, the car reached an incredible 388 kilometers per hour. That single run rewrote automotive history. For years, the legendary McLaren F1 had held the title of the world's fastest production car, a record many believed would stand for decades. The McLaren wasn't just another supercar, it was considered untouchable, an engineering masterpiece that defined an entire generation. Then a company that had started inside an old chicken barn came along and beat it. The automotive world was stunned. Who was Koenigsegg? Who was this young Swedish founder challenging brands that had spent generations building their reputations? Almost overnight, Christian von Koenigsegg transformed from an unknown dreamer into one of the most respected innovators in the automotive industry. But for Christian, breaking world records wasn't the destination. it was only the beginning. Because what came next wouldn't simply make Koenigsegg faster than its competitors, it would completely redefine what a hypercar could be. By this point, Koenigsegg had already proven it could build one of the fastest cars in the world. But Christian von Koenigsegg was never satisfied with simply making faster cars. His real goal was to reinvent the automobile itself. While the biggest manufacturers spent billions improving existing technology, Christian kept asking a much simpler question. What if we've been doing it wrong all along? That philosophy became the foundation of everything Koenigsegg created. Every new car wasn't just faster than the last. It introduced ideas the rest of the industry believed were impossible. One of the first examples is something every driver notices the moment they approach a Koenigsegg. The doors. They don't open like a Ferrari and they don't swing upward like a Lamborghini. Instead, they use Koenigsegg's patented dihedral synchro-helix door system. The doors rotate outward, rise upward, and move forward at the same time, allowing them to open fully even in incredibly tight parking spaces. It wasn't designed just to impress people. It solved a real-world problem that every supercar owner faces. Then Christian challenged another industry assumption. Koenigsegg became the first company in the world to produce one-piece carbon fiber wheels for a production car. Most engineers believed it couldn't be done safely, but Christian ignored the criticism. The finished wheels were dramatically lighter than aluminum ones, reducing unsprung weight and improving acceleration, braking, steering, and overall handling. Once again, Koenigsegg wasn't following the rules, it was rewriting them. But perhaps Christian's most revolutionary idea was hidden inside the engine itself. For more than 100 years, virtually every gasoline engine had relied on a camshaft to control the opening and closing of its valves. It was considered an essential component of engine design. Christian looked at that century-old technology and asked a question nobody else dared to ask. What if we removed it completely? The result was Freevalve, one of the most ambitious engine technologies ever developed. Instead of using a mechanical camshaft, every valve is controlled individually by a computer through pneumatic, hydraulic, and electronic actuators. This allows the engine to adjust valve timing independently for every cylinder, every combustion cycle, and every driving condition. The benefits are enormous. More power, better fuel efficiency, lower emissions, and greater flexibility than any conventional engine. Major automakers had experimented with similar ideas for decades, but never managed to commercialize them. Koenigsegg did. Then, in 2015, Christian introduced another engineering masterpiece, the Koenigsegg Regera. The name means to reign in Swedish, and it perfectly matched the car's ambition. The Regera combined a twin-turbocharged V8 with 3 electric motors to produce nearly 1,500 horsepower. But the most astonishing feature wasn't the power. It was the fact that the car had no traditional gearbox. Every high-performance car relies on multiple gears to accelerate efficiently. Christian decided to remove them almost entirely. Instead, he created a Koenigsegg Direct Drive, a revolutionary system that connects the gasoline engine almost directly to the rear wheels through a hydraulic coupling. At low speeds, the electric motors provide instant acceleration. As speed increases, the V8 seamlessly takes over without the interruptions caused by conventional gear changes. The result is continuous, uninterrupted acceleration unlike anything else on the road. It feels less like shifting through gears and more like being launched by a jet aircraft. The Regera quickly demonstrated what this technology could do, setting world records including the famous 0 to 400 to 0 km per hour challenge, accelerating to 400 km per hour and returning to a complete stop in just over 31 seconds, an achievement that stunned the automotive world. But Christian still wasn't finished. Next came the Jesko, named in honor of his father, Jesko von Koenigsegg, the man who believed in his son's impossible dream when almost nobody else did. The Jesko represented everything Koenigsegg had learned over more than 20 years of relentless innovation. Its twin-turbocharged V8 produced up to 1,600 horsepower on E85 fuel. Its aerodynamics were among the most advanced ever developed. And its transmission completely changed the rules once again. Called the light-speed transmission, or LST, it allows the driver to jump almost instantly from virtually any gear to another without passing through the gears in between. Traditional dual-clutch gearboxes simply can't do that. The result is lightning-fast shifts, uninterrupted acceleration, and maximum performance at every